Hello, world singers. My name is Brooke.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is
Cosmere Conversations. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode, and we are bringing in some friends from the interwebs to help us out with perhaps the most exciting of the interludes that we got to.
I don't know. Speak for yourself.
Well, I know you love Baxel. You're a Baxel girl. However, I was all about that Odium. So many of the interludes were this development of Odium as a character, and then we know at the end of Wind and Truth, the birth of Retribution. We've talked about it, but now it's time to get all of the details. And we couldn't get all those details just by our lonesome. We had to bring in...
too much. We needed help. We needed friends.
And that is why we have asked Stormlight Memes, also known as Ashley, and CosmereJunkie, also known as Gary, to come and join us today. Thank you both so much for coming onto the podcast and agreeing to talk about the passionate one, Odium himself.
Hey, glad to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, really excited.
We are eventually going to get into the nitty gritty and bring in some quotes and lore and get your thoughts and opinions about these Odium interludes. But I wanted to start us off with a little bit of the icebreaker question and go over who is your favorite character in the entire Cosmere, and or are you aligned with an order of Knight Radiant? Gary, why don't we start that with you?
Yeah, I'm basic B. I really like Dalinar. What can I say? I'm a sucker for a really good redemption story. I love Boromir in Lord of the Rings. Love Edmund in Narnia.
So
love
good.
Dalinar and his redemption arc in Oathbringer. It's just very impactful for me. So love him. I took the test for my Knights Radiant order, and I got back Truth Watcher / Windrunner, and I guess that's what I identify because the internet told me so. But I actually, off the top of my head right now, I don't remember what the Truth Watcher's ideal is. And so how much of a Truth Watcher am I? Who's to say?
Yeah, I think the benefit of a Truth Watcher is it's a little bit like Lightweaver in that you can kind of make things up as you go. It's all about defining your truth, not,
I think it's the other way.
Well, that's the Lightweaver, but they share some of those vibes as well.
I feel like Truth Watchers are like big capital T truths, like universal truth.
But they get to interpret like what truths they are seeking. And so if the internet has told you that you're a Truth Watcher, then you got to believe it. Because as we know, that's the real source of capital T truth is the internet. So Gary, thank you.
That is dangerous.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. We're just going to go right off the cliff edge right now. But
it's high stakes, so we're good.
Let's throw it over to Ashley, Stormlight Memes, and your favorite character in the Cosmere, as well as Order of Knight Radiant.
Okay. Favorite character, Cosmere whole, is definitely Sazed / Harmony. I just love his journey. I love and really empathize with the struggles that he goes through in Mistborn Era 1. I love how he kind of develops and continues to change even in his current state. So I'm a huge Sazed fan.
Yeah, one of the best and most emotional characters. Love them so much. What about your Knight Radiant order?
So I am a Lightweaver. So speaking of going back to what you guys were saying about creating your own truth and everything. So I think I've taken the quiz a few times because my memory is terrible and I keep forgetting what mine was. But this last time I took it, we made it like official by buying the Lightweaver pajama set from the
now you'll
the
never
store,
forget.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I ever forget, I just go put on pajamas and there we go. Just like my girl Shalon got the Lightweaver going on.
Love it.
Truly excellent. And I know that both of you have been part of the Cosmere community, Cosmere content creator community, just
For
for
a long time.
all the possible, yeah, for a long time. And, you know, some would say you're the most well-known creators in the community. Could you tell me a little bit about how you got started reading the Cosmere, and then what led you to eventually kind of creating content on TikTok, Instagram, so on and so forth? Ashley, could we start with you?
Yeah. So I started reading the Cosmere because I had just kind of gone into fantasy. I had started a new job in a new city and I had long commutes. I needed good long audiobooks. And so I had been reading Robin Hobb with The Realm of the Elderlings, and that got really, really sad. And then I went to the internet and I said, what should I read next? And they said, how about Brandon Sanderson? So I dove headfirst into Mistborn and Stormlight Archive at the same time. So I would
Wow.
start one. Yeah, so I started with the Final Empire, and then I immediately went to the Way of Kings, and so I kind of ping ponged between two series, and just it became everything that I absorbed over the course of like I don't know a couple of years, and then the pandemic hit, and we were all stuck in our houses. And I downloaded this silly app called TikTok, and everybody was doing memes and dances, and I was like, I can't dance, but I can do memes. And so at the time, the only thing that I could think about was Cosmere, and so I just started doing video creation based on that. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get a few hundred people who like my stuff, and then next thing I knew, it was thousands of people in a community that I didn't even know existed. And so I just kept on going with that.
That's great. Gary, what about you? How did you get into the Cosmere?
So when I was in high school, I was 16 or 17, and my uncle gave me The Way of Kings and said I should read it. And I was not Cosmere aware. I was just like, this is a big book. I read it and loved it, read the second one, and that was all that was out at the time. And so I stopped and I didn't look for other books from the author. And then years later, I was reading the next books after they came out, and someone mentioned that like they're connected, and that I think they're like Wit shows up in other books, and I was intrigued to say the least, and I started reading it, and I just became obsessed. Loved the whole series, but The Way of Kings still remains like my favorite book, just because it was my first and it was so well done. So as far as content creation, have to give big props to Ashley, because she's like the OG. Like I was seeing her stuff before I started, and she was a big inspiration for me to start doing things. But I wasn't as brave. I wasn't gonna like show my face as much, so I did a lot more memes, and they were less effort, I think, because I didn't actually have to get out and like record myself. And eventually I learned to do that. But I actually started out on YouTube, made a few like lore videos, things like that, and then I had my first kid, and I was like, the time suck of having a baby really was so taxing. And I was like, well, what can I do to like still grow my channel while saving time? And so I was like, well, I'll make an Instagram account, and then whenever I make a video, I'll promote it over here. And so I made the Instagram account in order to promote myself on YouTube, and very quickly blew my YouTube out of the water. And I was like, well, I'm done there, because this is easier and more fun, and I'm getting more dopamine from the likes and everything. So stuck with that from there on, and it's history now.
Yeah, it's certainly a good bit of history. I think that anyone who has those apps has probably seen your stuff come up. And I am curious, without going, fully into your process. I do want to bring us back to Odium, but you mentioned that dopamine hit and a little bit of how that process like develops for you, Gary. I'm wondering, just because both of you had this experience of going viral in the past, at least with some of your posts, but your content in general has done very well. In what ways has that fueled some of your creativity? And also, in what ways has that maybe been a hindrance? Let's go right back to Gary, and then we'll pass it over to Ashley after.
Yeah, going viral definitely motivates you to keep going. It's something that you start chasing, and you definitely need to. It's something that you got to be careful with, because you can definitely fall into the trap of just chasing views and wanting to get a bigger number, and that can be unhealthy for your mental space. So that's definitely probably like a negative aspect of it, is that it sets you up. And then I think last year, I've talked with a couple of creators that last year the whole internet was so excited for Wind and Truth. Speaking of, we're getting into that. And so there was just this swell of like everybody in the world in the fandom seemed to be rereading all the books. They were doing their rereads. They were excited. They were engaged. And then after Wind and Truth came, a lot of the creators I've spoken with feels this big slump where like, we're just not seeing the views that we were seeing. We're not getting the engagement we were seeing. And if you were coming from that space of like, oh, this is my expectation, this is what we're going to be staying at, it can be a little demoralizing if you are doing it for the views and all of that. And so I think like it's really important to focus just on like the connections, the people that like are in your comments every time you post, because you know, like that's what it's really about, is you're enjoying these books with real people. And so
do you find that because you've been in the like creator space for so long, do you feel like you're a little bit used to the kinds of ups and downs, or do you think this moment in particular was kind of a new thing even for you who's been doing this for a while?
like I'd say I've certainly had my ups and downs the entire journey. I just think in general, like there was a time where like every single post was doing super well, and now it's a little more hit and miss again. If you make good content, then it does well, but if you don't, then it doesn't do as well. And sometimes you make it good content and you put a lot of work in it and it still doesn't do well, you know. It's the algorithm. But I would say, to answer your question, yes, there are ups and downs. There always have been, but that was a very noticeable swell last year where everything was blowing up.
Ashley, what do you think? How does this kind of like the platforms that you're on, the dopamine rush of going viral, how does that affect your creativity in positive and or negative ways?
I think that Gary did a really good job of summarizing it, that there's positives and negatives to it. Like the dopamine is definitely like that instant reward. Like when you see that it's getting numbers, when you see the hits, the views, the likes, you get the comments of people saying, "This is hilarious," and "Oh my gosh, are you living in my brain?" And like it just kind of has this nice rush, you know? And so on the one hand, it kind of gives you that high, but on the other hand, it's very intangible. So it's not like you're getting monetary gain, or I mean, in some cases you might be, but it is fleeting. It's not. Uh, there aren't a whole lot of people in the Cosmere creator space who are making big bucks off of this. So, I mean, I think that Gary had a really good point of saying like what the important part is, like the connections that you make. I think a lot of the Cosmere creators have had opportunities to make connections with people in the Dragonsteel community. So, especially like the Brotherwise games, like they're really active in the Cosmere space. And so getting to have that sense of belonging, that sense of camaraderie is really important. And it has been a big, longer lasting impact than just the temporary views that you get. Because same thing, like Gary said it correctly, like where you have like this really good video that goes viral and you're like, this is it. I made it. I found the right magic sauce. And then you do the right magic sauce the next time and then it doesn't hit as well. And then that has like almost the exact opposite effect. You're like, well, what did I do wrong? How did I get this so wrong after I had just gotten it so right? And there's a lot of frustration that comes with that. But then, especially if you've been doing this for years, you've seen that happen over and over to the point where it doesn't feel as hard when the views get low. But it also means that when the views get high, it doesn't feel as rewarding because you're like, oh, okay, well, this is a fluke. glad it's happening, but okay. Like we'll ride this high for a little bit and then we'll go back to our daily lives. So the things that I have really gotten long term out of it is that I've made long lasting friends. Like I've made connections. I remember back in the day when I was in high school, parents would always say, never meet anybody on the internet. I have met lots of people on the internet because of this channel and like made friends that I fly out to go see.
Aw.
And like have really good, fantastic, life changing connections because of this channel. And then people will be like, well, how did you meet? And we're like, funny story. Have you heard of TikTok? And so I think that I've recently, and I kind of talked about this on my channel recently, is that I have taken a big step back from the creator space. I found at the very beginning of this year that it was just really hard on my mental health. This idea of chasing strangers' approval
Yeah.
is hard. And then also, like what Gary was saying about the fact that there was a slump after we all got through Wind and Truth, we all rode that battle together, and it was a doozy of a book. And then you just kind of feel a little bit like you need an 8-year nap after that. So I'm kind of dipping my toes back in. I've started saving sounds again and looking at whatever new meme is trending just for the sake of fun, because at least for me, that's what it started as. Was back in 2021 when I had a new baby and I was stuck in the house because of COVID, and so I needed something a creative outlet, and so getting back into the fun of it and chasing that. I feel like that's been far more of a reward than the temporary high of the likes and the views.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, podcasting is like pretty different from making short videos on the internet in a lot of ways. But I would say we've found the same thing, that it's really important for us to continue to focus on like what makes this fun
Mhm.
rather than worrying about necessarily the audience or the numbers or whatever. Like, we started the podcast just because we talk about the Cosmere literally all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, keeping that focus on like what's fun about it and what is like connecting us to each other and to other Cosmere fans is, I think, we found the thing that makes it sustainable.
It
Yeah.
certainly is a little bit easier if I, could give each of you who has far more followers than me, if I could give you some advice, it would be bring your spouse into everything. And then you
Or
could
a
just,
friend.
or a friend. But I think it's just like, we're doing like a cheat code over here where I just want to talk to her because I'm married to her. I like talking to her. And we happen to like talking about the Cosmere. And then we just record those conversations and have been doing that for a long time. So the specific nature of the algorithm and kind of like those peaks and valleys,
Yeah.
they just haven't been something that we personally felt as much, but we definitely hear it from friends all the time. And I do think that like the powerful thing is about the capital C connections wherever they happen to be coming from. Like you mentioned, the Brotherwise and the RPG have had just so much fun this year with other people who want to play the RPG and just like meeting people, but getting to spend lots of time because obviously RPGs take a lot of time. So you get to spend like extra hours with people who are just really into the Cosmere, and it's a lot of fun. Highly encourage anyone to go pick it up. And I wanted to dive into kind of like our real world, asking about those dopamine hits and the highs and the lows, because where we're actually taking this conversation is into the highs and the lows of Wind and Truth with Odium, who's probably, the god of passion, as Reza used to define himself, but certainly one of these characters that we've watched hit highs and lows. And there's moments when Taravangian's my favorite, most interesting character in the Stormlight archive. And then there's moments when I hate him with a fiery passion that Odium would understand and maybe appreciate. But so let's break it up this way. What I'd like us all to do is kind of move through the interludes, looking at what the actual like plot points are and how they develop, and then just getting a vibe check, a feel of what happened and what occurred, and kind of like where you would place Odium's journey that we see play out in Wind and Truth. So
Yeah, because we leave Rhythm of War on such a cliffhanger with this like huge event of Taravangian ascending to Odium. And so there's so much in Wind and Truth that needs to be kind of dived into and explored about what does this mean? What does this look like? What kind of shard is Taravangian going to be? He's pretty sus as a human. And then we get to see, you know, we come into Wind and Truth with this question of like, okay, what is this going to mean? And the interludes are really where we get to see that story play out.
do you want to start us off with the first interlude and just kind of like give us an introduction and move us through kind of what transpires in that first interlude?
We start by picking up with Odium, who is sort of traveling through Rashar. He is currently in Tubela, which is like not a place we really go to very often. And unfortunately, he is in this circumstance watching a bunch of people die from famine. Big bummer. And even Taravangian, now as a god, maybe even more so as a god, starts to feel really overwhelmed by the fact that he is now like in some way responsible for this. And we start to see his realization what it means to be the god of emotions in this moment. We hear, quote, "So many children died here unseen. And Odium, that was not my name. He thought, I cannot lose myself in godhood," end quote. And so this immediately is starting to set up this struggle that we see Taravangian just barely begin to start, that we sort of see the end of with Reza as the vessel of Odium, this constant battle to maintain individuality and identity as a vessel of a power that is kind of constantly trying to subsume you.
This is where I wanted to start and just kind of get your general thoughts, because not only do we see this on the page with Odium, we also see it with Honor in the spiritual realm flashbacks, where Tanavast and the power of Honor are competing. We've kind of seen it play out in similar ways with Preservation on Scadrial. And so, Ashley, I'd love to just get your first thoughts on this struggle that seems to exist with all of the shards between the power itself and the person that they are. How important do you think this is? You know, what do you find interesting about it? Let me just kind of like get your first feedback on this.
So I think that there are some interesting concepts at play because it's so consistent. It would be one thing if we only saw that with the quote unquote like the bad or whatever.
Yeah.
Like we see that, like you mentioned with Preservation, we also see that with Harmony. We see this struggle between the self-identity and then, like you said, the power. Little caveat that once again, like my understanding of the lore as a whole in the Cosmere is tenuous at best. But when considering the aspects of how consistent that is, and then like thinking back to the shattering of Adel Nauseam and this idea of why, because we still don't fully understand why the 16 plus Hoyd question mark had gone to eliminate him and why that even happened to begin with. And so this idea that all of those aspects of his identity were so powerful, even on their own, imagining just how strong they are together in one entity, and just what kind of implications that has, what kind of like what we might be able to surmise about Adel Nauseam as a being, as a creature, as a character, and the motivations behind the 16 to go up against him. Because sometimes we kind of question what was that dynamic like, and people have their theories, but one of them tends to be this idea of the powerful. And if he was so powerful that even his little tiny aspects of his personality overwhelm somebody's individual identity, that is a little bit scary to just kind of conceptualize. Also, because the aspect of or the concept of an individual's identity and how they perceive themselves is so important in the
Yeah.
Cosmere, and their soul and how they how not just how they perceive themselves, but how they identify themselves is so important. For a power to usurp that is very kind of terrifying, and identifying how that might impact the original lore of the Cosmere.
Certainly agree there. And we have Teravangian like holding on to his identity, saying like, I cannot be consumed. I'm not Odium. I am Teravangian.
Yeah.
But he also has this new power. He says, quote, I have infinite capacity, Odium whispered, his voice ragged. I can see to the ends of the Cosmere. I can see the lives of people great and small. I had thought this wonderful, with so much to experience, but now I find only suffering. Infinite capacity to see, infinite capacity to feel, infinite capacity for agony, end quote. He begins to describe himself as this person divided with one thinking side and one feeling side, which I think can be read a bunch of different ways. And Gary, this is kind of where I want to throw it over to you, because do you think that is still his boon and his curse? Or is he talking more about I'm the identity of Teravangian and this power of Odium? Or is he divided within Teravangian? And then there's another thing that he has to deal with,
Yeah.
which is the power itself. What are your thoughts there?
I think for sure it's probably connected to his boon. And one of the reasons I think that is because we know this was all part of Cultivation's master plan, right? And she's the one that gave him the boon with the intention and knowing full well that her ultimate plan for him was to help him ascend to the power. And so I think that just feels very cultivation-y to lay it down and knock the dominoes over. I think that's my thoughts. I'm not as long-winded as Ashley. Sorry.
No, that's perfect, because we're going to do this for a while. So there's no need to kind of like get everything out in this moment. And I appreciate those thoughts because it's something we're going to see repeatedly come up. Like this is the beginning point of Teravangian and Odium, but then it continues to play out. And he's like experiencing all of this stuff in a way that I think the Lord Ruler did for a moment, where he's like, I now have infinite power as a sliver, not a full shard, but like I now have infinite power, and like, oops, I moved the planet too much. Oops, I set off all the volcanoes. Like, oops, I've done something. And Odium specifically says this. He says, quote, by directly intervening on such a granular level, he risked creating a society where no one learned and where civilization did not progress. By supernaturally forbidding warlords, he would also stifle scientists and artists. By removing the capacity for violence, he would also remove the capacity for mercy.
Yeah, because he's struggling so much with his emotional response to this new power. Cultivation shows up and she's like, hey, dude, don't do anything rash. And he's like, what the heck? There's all this suffering. Like, how come you people who've been in power haven't been doing anything about it? Let's fix it. And then he eventually, as you read in that quote, starts to realize like, it's actually not that simple, which is kind of a theme that we come back to quite a bit here on the podcast. I like to use the example of the Lord Ruler, where Vin and the crew, take him down for really good reasons and then sort of immediately realize, oh, dang, he was like doing a bunch of stuff that we didn't realize, and we don't actually have a solution for those things. And I think that that's probably kind of the same thing as the shattering of Adonalsium, that these 16 people plus Hoyd were like, yo, this is for your own good. We're going to take you out. They ascend, and then they're like, Oh, now I see. This is a little bit more complicated than maybe I thought it was.
Gary, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like you have seen that as well in Mistborn with Harmony as well in the Wax and Wayne trilogy,
Yeah.
especially when Wax is talking with Harmony and he's like, "Why can't you stop all the suffering?" And you get a very similar line of thought from Sazed, basically saying that, well, what sufferings should I stop? Which ones should I not? You need to be able to progress, but if we let preservation take over, then nothing's going to happen and there will be no growth. And it's really, really fascinating philosophies to think about.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about cultivation, because cultivation in this moment also kind of explains her philosophy of how she is navigating this. She tries to encourage Odium to do this too, and he's not having it, but she says that she goes about it by trying to establish like systems in the world and like teachings or build in incentives that encourage people to make the decisions that she thinks are right. And she describes this as, quote, "We take time and we steer, but we do not dominate," end quote. And Tyler and I have kind of an ongoing argument about whether cultivation is like good or bad. And so I'm really interested to hear both of your takes on how you feel about cultivation, what you think about like her approach to things, if we even know enough yet. Ashley, do you have a thought here?
I have to say that when it comes to cultivation, I was surprised by her part in the story because she had been kind of built up as this mysterious being who had knowledge that we didn't. She was kind of working in the background. She was, shrouded in mystery and making very strong impacts on characters that we knew and loved. Um, but we didn't really know much about her. And then this is the first time that we get to kind of talk to her face to face. And she surprised me by how imperfect she was.
Mm.
Like I was sitting there like cultivation's like, the badass behind everything. Once we meet her, she's gonna like bestow upon us infinite wisdom. And essentially she was just like, don't screw anything up. Oh no, you're screwing things up. Oh no. And I'm like, wait, this is cultivation? This is the mysterious creature from the Black Lagoon? I'm very confused.
So
So
disillusioned.
yes, I mean it honestly it kind of made me think of like with the Wizard of Oz and they see the
Mm.
wizard and they think he's so powerful and he's behind
Yeah.
the scenes and everything and they meet him and they're like, "You're the wizard?" That's kind of how I felt with cultivation a little bit. But I also think that that's still like very valuable because once again, she is a shard, just like all of the others. She's imperfect. She has very distinct powers and motivations, and the way that it manifests in the story is going to be different from all the others. But I think it's like a nice reminder that even if we assume something about a shard, just remember that they're always imperfect.
Yeah.
Like we have
Definitely.
that same thing with when we find out more about Honor through the flashbacks, and we find out more about him as being imperfect and made huge mistakes across the board. Even though throughout this entire series so far, Honor has been Honor. Like
Yeah.
everybody's like it's Honor,
He's
and
the good guy.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
you meet him, and you're like, oh,
Like,
never meet your heroes. My bad,
no,
I
no.
forgot. But I do I like it and I don't. I also have some thoughts that are not fully formed. But I went to Baylor for my undergrad, and Baylor, if you don't know, they force you. Well, you're required to take religion courses. And one of the things that we learned about were the different theories on God within Christianity and how he approaches like if he's a hands off or a hands on, does he essentially start the clock and then watch it go kind of thing? And a lot of what I'm seeing in the different shards is different takes on
Yeah.
those different theories. How hands on are they? How good or bad or what have you? What's the motivation behind it? So I don't know if that's just me reading into it or if that was an intentional thing, but I find that very intriguing with the shards.
Yeah, I mean, what a great opportunity for Brandon, where most authors, if they're writing a god figure, they only really get one opportunity to like, it's going to be a hands-on god, or it's going to be a god in the background,
Yeah,
or a
even if
god.
they have a pantheon, there's usually like an overriding principle of how all the gods in the pantheon interact in that way. But
But in
with
the
the
Cosmere,
shards, because they're so separate,
yeah,
you really can assign like a different strategy to each one.
we're going to talk more about cultivation, especially I think after the next interlude. But from this first one, there is a very important conversation from Teravangian. So this is his perspective on cultivation. And would you read this out with me?
Sure.
We have, quote, "I blame you," he said, "because you should have done better. 8,000 years, and you should have fixed all this, all three of you.
You can see the circumstances that prevented that.
Your fault still. I can do better."
Odium, do not make this mistake.
And so she's reminding him, but then it jumps forward a little bit in their conversation. And he says, quote, "So many gods who are cowards.
Because we give people choice?
Because you killed your father and now worry the same will happen to you. Like the warlords here, you consolidate power so that no one can kill you." End quote. And this is where I'm reading, the middle of the night for Wind and Truth when it first came out. And I'm like, let Teravangian cook. This could be good. I have this moment of like, I respect this. This argument, this mindset makes sense. The shards are all terrified of the thing that they did to Adonalsium. They killed their father and now they're preventing. And through that prevention, they are causing problems of suffering.
I think that's true, but I do have to point out that
There's more. There's more of the book. Tyler didn't stop here, just for the record.
Oh, well, of course. But she tries to tell him like, hey, actually, there's a bunch of actions you could take right now to like make the world better. For example, you could stop the war that you're currently waging and like that would be better and less people would die if that's what you're so upset about. And he is like, no, I can't possibly do that. I can be mad at you though.
Yeah.
So like, let's just hold on the Teravangian pump up.
Yes, it's not going to be a permanent pump up, but in this moment, I was definitely acknowledging like the shards are a problem. Teravangian's criticisms are valid. His result is not valid. Where he goes with it is not valid. But I think like the understanding of like something is wrong with the shards is important. And then at the end of this interlude, we have one of the like the quote unquote rules that seem to be binding to the shards when cultivation says that he and she and all the shards are forbidden from taking direct action against any who are not fully given to you. And Odium says, because of the pact that my predecessors made, I could break that. And she points out, if you do that, you're going to be open and vulnerable to outside attack. The powers bind us to our promises, particularly those made and sealed with a formal oath. And that quote right there is happening between cultivation and Odium, but of course it's applicable to honor and cultivation.
Yeah.
And it's applicable to all these shards that made formal oaths and then started to break them. Honor and cultivation, like most obviously, don't join up on the same planet, and then they immediately join up on the same planet, and eventually that's going to like tear Honor apart because he's in violation of this oath. Do you want to take this into our next interlude?
Yes. We pick up again with Teravangian, and we continue to see this internal warring of his emotional and rational sides. He even wonders if this is like part of cultivation's plan with his boon and his curse, that she was not only trying to create somebody who would align with the power of Odium due to his time spent extremely emotional, but also to create someone who would be paralyzed by this division between thought and feeling. And so, like, effectively taking Odium and Odium's vessel kind of off the table because it would be so paralyzed with indecision, which I think is a really interesting thought for him to have. Definitely not something that I thought of before he ascended. To your question earlier, Tyler, about like, is this still his boon and curse, or is this just a function of the power? I kind of think it's all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
That his boon and his curse still exist within himself, or like that experience at least still like lives within him. Plus there's just a natural element of this that all humans experience to some extent. Plus there's the vessel shard situation. And I mean, I guess you could kind of give Taravangian credit that he does navigate it all probably better than a
Anybody
regular
else.
person, would do. I hate that I have to say something positive about him, but that's probably one of the things. And Cultivation still has not given up on him. She appears again. She like tries to persuade him that he doesn't need to go down the path of trying to become the only god, which is what he has sort of latched onto as like, well, all of y'all suck, but I'm the one who's gonna do it right. I'm exceptional. And she says, quote, "It does not have to be one god. One solution will never work for all. That was part of why we had to do what we did 10,000 years ago. Let them be, Odium." End quote. Great lore drop on the shattering there.
Yes. And Gary, I'd love to get your opinion as well about this kind of transition and maybe like the purposeful transition between Taravangian with his split mind, his boon and his curse, into Odium. It's almost like Cultivation was trying to build up a harmony situation within Odium.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
He doesn't have two shards
Harmony is
yet.
like her dream for Odium.
Yes, but like she wants the paralysis of harmony inside of Odium. And so I'd love to understand like how you see that dynamic of a split Taravangian, a split Odium, and you can even take us all the way to the extreme because then he is going to be split between Honor and Odium as Retribution.
Taravangian has this boon that causes him to feel very strongly one day, but then be very intellectual on another day and not have empathy hardly at all. And Cultivation's hoping to kind of put him in a deadlock against himself when he has the power, because he has empathy one day and he determines that he's going to fix everything for the people, and then on the other day he has a bunch of like his intelligence is high and he wants to move forward with that. It's interesting because like as we get down, and I don't mean to spoil what comes later, but like we find that those two things don't necessarily have to want different things.
Exactly.
They can, you can come from an intellectual perspective and from a heart perspective, and for different reasons still choose to take the same action. So Cultivation, I don't think she saw that coming. And now we're looking at him being split even further when we get further down where he becomes Retribution. Now he's got two shards, Honor, who is very set on oaths and making sure that like you don't break oaths. And then you have Hatred with Odium, where you've got like passion and wanting to do those things. Those things aren't necessarily contradictory. It's not like Preservation and Ruin, where you're keeping something safe and you're destroying. It's those things you can channel anger and keeping oaths towards a common goal. And so I think this blew up in Cultivation's faith a little bit, for sure.
Do we think that this experience will also help Taravangian be better at holding two shards?
I think so. I know a lot of like I saw this crazy theory before Wind and Truth that people thought the perfect person to hold multiple shards would be Shallan because of her split personality, where she could hold like all 3 shards on Roshar, and each personality would kind of manage a different one. And I think that's probably true, where like Taravangian is uniquely cultivated, for lack of a better word,
Yeah,
to
uniquely
be
gifted.
able to handle the 2 shards.
I think that's a great point, is like this could have gone one direction, and maybe it was the path that cultivation thought that they were on, but it seems to eventually get us to a different solution, because instead of further and further spreading apart and becoming paralyzed with inaction, the bicameral nature of Taravangian's mind is going to snap into alignment. And before we get there, there's one other important thing in this interlude. It's when cultivation tells Odium to look up into the Cosmere, and she like shows him the vastness of the Cosmere, and he says that he can see all of the gods, the other shards, but that only one of them held 2 shards of power, and they were not functioning properly. Obviously talking about harmony there, but he begins to focus on the fact that he cannot see 2 of the shards, that 2 are completely vanished and have not been interacting with the others. He understood one with some effort, and I think that we have talked about that one being, or what was once known as like the survival shard.
Yeah, the like hide and survive shard.
Yes, and then the other he name drops specifically, and that is Valor. Where had Valor gone? How did she hide even from his all-powerful eyes? And so I'd love to get a quick theory check from both of you.
Give us your wildest theory.
What do you think about Valor?
Because there's really no actual information.
Exactly. You can say anything you want to. Valor is actually Emily Sanderson, and she stepped out of the books, and she is a fourth wall breaking character. That's how far crazy you can go, or even crazier. But Ashley, for a slightly more realistic take, what do you think about Valor?
Oh no, it's not realistic at all. Have you ever played Kingdom Hearts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so you know that there's the form Valor in Kingdom Hearts. That's where I think the shard went. I think that it just went full on into Kingdom Heartsville and became the form for Sora,
I love
for
it.
Valor. Yeah, that's
perfect. Yeah, it's taking a break, really, because it jumped into another universe. That's
Yes.
almost as good as Emily Sanderson is Valor.
Yeah.
It's just like it went into another fictional series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And actually, it went back in time to go to early 2000s so that it could join the whole Disney universe. Absolutely. That's my theory.
Wonderful Valor theory. Thank you for bringing it to us. Gary, what about you? Do you have any Valor theories?
Yeah, we'll lay one on you. To quote Pippin from The Lord of the Rings, the closer we are to danger, the further we are from harm. And so I think Valor is hiding right under Odium's nose. He's right at Roshar. He or she. He said she.
It's
Sorry.
she.
I think it's
yeah.
a she. Yeah.
Is right under Odium's nose and just too close, and he's not looking in the right direction for her.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I have seen this as well, specifically like that Odium would naturally start looking at the other shards. He was eventually going to start exploring outwards.
Yeah.
But cultivation like guided his eyes upward and was like, look at all the shards out there. And so his attention, his focus is upwards. And what you're saying is he should be looking downwards. He should be looking at the planet itself, because Valor is somehow hidden within. In our fourth moon episode, we talked about like, what if the fourth moon, because it like cast a kind of like force field for a long while that was like protective in a way, and that the shards couldn't even see what was going on around the fourth moon. And we were saying like, what if that was the home of Valor for a while, that they were hanging out there, and now they've entered into the planet of Roshar enough where they're not obvious to the other shards, but cultivation would know and just like not want to reveal that bit of information. I like it. Anyone in the audience, please tell us your Valor theories. There's nothing but speculation we can do for the next 6+ years. So hit us with your best ones. And Brooke, could you take us into the next of our interludes.
Yeah, at the end of this interlude, he makes this decision to do an experiment and to let his emotional and rational sides each kind of rule in turn. He says he's going to give each one a chance to drive the bus, essentially. And so he starts this experiment, and rationally, he decides that while there are arguments for ending his current war on Rashar, he just logically can't take that path, of course, because in large part, the power of Odium doesn't want an end to the war. It wants to fight. And especially coming off of being held by Reza, who was really trying to corral the power of Odium. The power now is in such a sort of volatile state that Taravangian definitely doesn't want to do the same thing and kind of risk angering the power and potentially losing the power. Because, importantly, there's another being on Rashar that the power actually would rather be with by Mishram, which we've talked about a little bit in the past. Totally wild. Ashley, I see you nodding. Tell me your thoughts.
This is way out of my realm, so my thoughts on it are scattered at best. The whole concept of Ba Edo Mishram, even throughout the whole thing, just like I was following it, but I also wasn't.
Yeah.
It was just, there was so much chaos. And I'm glad that Sanderson had Shallan at the forefront of that, because I feel like she's the only one who understood chaos enough to be at the lead of the pack to track down Edo Mishram. So if I'm nodding, it's more of a, oh, okay, kind of nod. Less of a, I know what's going on, and more of a dizzy sort of nod.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, we're just hoping to give you some new material for eventual memes about just like the development of Stormlight memes. Of I didn't understand Ba Edo Mishram, I'm learning about Ba Edo Mishram, and then eventually you are Ba Edo Mishram.
That is the culmination of the last 5 years, is that I become Ba Edo Mishram.
I'm imagining like an Animorphs of Ashley just like slowly morphing into Ba Edo Mishram.
Yes, 1,000%. Thank you. I'm so glad we could reveal this on your podcast. I was going to do an announcement on my channel, but no, it's the big reveal right here.
No, this is just setting up the big reveal. You got to let a couple of people like, oh, did you hear? No, you haven't heard. And then when it happens, boom, it's all going to be wonderful. This kind of understanding that Taravangian has about the power of Odium, again, is reflected in what we learn about the past with Honor and Tanavast. Tanavast and Reza were trying to like hold back the power. Tanavast even having moments of like, no, I'm the god. You listen to me, power. And for a while, the power was like, okay, forced down. But eventually, the power always wins. It's like the ocean against a stone wall. The stone will turn to sand over time. There's never been a rock that won against the ocean. No matter how like powerful and like cool they might look, it's all an aspect of decay. And we're just like witnessing the decay first of Reza.
And Taravangian is like approaching this, I think, in maybe a smarter way.
Definitely, yeah.
But he also sort of immediately comes up against issues. He like tries to sort of reason with the power and is like, hey, don't you realize that like if you just go crazy with emotion like you want to, eventually everyone's just going to be dead and then there actually won't be any more emotion. So maybe just like chill. And the power is not sentient or smart enough for that. It's just like, no, I'm going to keep being Odium.
Gary, what do you think about emotions and kind of like how that interacts with the power of Odium?
Well, I was just thinking, like, far be it for me to disagree with a god in cultivation. I know she said that there were very good reasons for splitting up Adolnasium, but I almost wonder if there's a commentary here that Brandon's doing about throwing yourself full throttle into one like defining feature with the shards, that if you focus on just one attribute, you get lost in it. You get swept away by it. I have wondered for a while if maybe the Cosmere he's pointing it towards, it's actually better to be well-rounded. You know, like they always tell us when you're gonna be applying for jobs that you need to have lots of things on your resume. In a sense, it is true. Like you hear that too much of anything, even a good thing, can become a bad thing, right? And it takes away from other parts of your life. And I feel like you definitely see that with all of these shards. It's a common theme that all of these shards have problems. All of them have issues. We haven't run into one shard that we've gotten to have a deep look at where we're like, there aren't negatives to this shard. And who knows, maybe down the line when Brandon is wrapping up the Cosmere in 30 years, we'll all be like, oh, look, they're going to bring all the shards back together and prove that they should have just left it alone the whole time.
Yeah, definitely one of the big mega theories out there. I am intrigued looking at the four of us sitting here and talking about how you can't lean too hard into one thing. We have Cosmere Conversations, CosmereJunkie, and Stormlight Memes. Almost like
You think we've leaned in too far?
We might have leaned in too far to the Cosmere, and maybe it was a better idea to diversify, spread out, be more well-rounded.
I mean, I think we were talking about that at the beginning of this conversation, and like the importance of having some perspective.
Yes, having perspective, because of if you're on the massive waves and that's the only thing that's important to you, and whether that's an algorithmic wave of content creation or just the vibes of the emotions of Odium, if that's all you're doing, then you're bound to feel the peaks and the valleys and the extremes of the highs and the lows. And maybe that's not the best for anyone's mental health, whether it be us here or Teravangian themselves. I think that it's important to call out that Teravangian has this realization about the power not actually encompassing all emotions. He says, quote, though it should have been all emotions, and his predecessor had insisted that was his purview, the power did not like subtle emotions. It liked loud ones, end quote.
He specifically notes that love and contentment are examples of things that Odium does not contain, and that anger is Odium's favorite emotion because it's so long-lasting and hot burning.
So Odium is just social media.
Yes,
like that.
100%.
Yes.
I think that's an excellent call out, is just like, what does the algorithm want? The same thing that Odium wants. It wants anger. Right?
It wants, strong emotions.
It
And
wants
anger
passion.
happens to be like one of the best ones.
And it knows how to work with it. It knows like what the wave is going to come out when it's anger. It's like, oh, if we deliver this to X number of people, then some percentage of those are going to respond in this way, which we can deliver to X number of people and make them respond.
This is such a great call, Ashley. We all just need to remember that the algorithm is Odium.
Yeah, that's it. We're always constantly trying to battle Odium / the algorithm. And
You're like,
trying to
don't
win
give
that
it too
war.
much of your energy.
We are his.
Yes, exactly. There are moments when like that is important. It is like still required to, when you have a reaction of anger, when you have something that's like passionate and driving you, that's important to note. It's like, what is it about this circumstance that is making me angry? I'm very like Windrunner coded. So like if someone is being picked on, or if like someone is, being mistreated, I get angry in a way that I also recognize is dangerous because I'm a mature enough individual to like see what's going on. But like if I was just leaning in to my anger and aggression, then it would just be like, oh, this person picked on this person, let's fight them, and like fisticuffs will ensue. And of course, that's how you can eventually
right into the cycle.
That's eventually how you can have retribution, because like the honor, the oath can be in alignment with Odium. What do you think about that, Gary?
Yeah, no, you just reminded me. I did a post because the Way of Kings turned 15
Oh my
just a few
gosh,
days
don't tell
ago,
me that.
and so yeah, we're all getting old.
Yep.
But I put a bunch of my favorite quotes together from it, and one of them, right in the first book, he says that it's Dalinar speaking, and he says to lack emotions is to be dead, but to act on every emotion is to be a child,
Yeah.
right? And so like that, I think that really speaks to what you're saying, and that like something that Odium needs to learn because he acts on his emotions, right? So
Yeah.
Odium is just a big baby, I think is canonically what we're getting at here.
I like all the descriptions of Odium we're going to have by the end of this are going to be hilarious. Algorithm, baby, good, bad. What do you think, Ashley?
Yeah, the comparison of the algorithm essentially just being a giant toddler. I feel like that really hits hard in the old social media space. Um, I think that it's interesting because a lot of like kind of on a serious note, this idea that pervades through the series is that power is neither good nor bad. Like it just exists. Power is a force, and then how you channel it, how you balance it is what drives the positive or negative impacts. So when you're talking about these passions, when you're talking about these even anger to that extent, that just it's neutral. Anger is not necessarily a bad thing because when you apply it in specific circumstances, that's when you have a positive or a negative outcome. And we saw that like even in Oathbringer when Dalinar is kind of coming into his full realization moment about how he has had this passion in his life, and it has driven him because of the thrill and how close it has been in his existence. But it doesn't talk about just the bad stuff. It doesn't just. It's not only the moments in his life where he was, ripping people's heads off. It was also when he felt triumph, when he felt intense joy because of the birth of his son and like winning and having justice served. Like that's not necessarily passion. Even anger is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is that balance. It is the application that tends to be the driving force there. And I think that can also be applied to the rest of the shards, Odium included. I don't necessarily think like I have my thoughts on Teravangian as a character and as a person, and I think we all have worries about what's going to happen now that he is Retribution, which by the way, terrifying name.
Yeah,
Retribution.
it's really scary.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
think
thought
we should be afraid of him. I don't think there's
yes.
like any gray area at this point.
I What's going to be interesting to me is how he balances with the other shards, specifically Harmony slash Discord
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and how all of those because the force and the power is just a force in motion. And there's always an equal and opposite reaction to wherever he's going to be. And so it'll be interesting now that the other shards have kind of turned their attention onto him, how that's going to drive. I have one thing, I swear I'm not constantly thinking about Disney, but the shards always make me think of have you ever watched the movie Mulan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know where Mulan, like in the montage with "I'll make a man out of you," and Mulan holds up the two weights,
Yes.
and then she,
Uses
uses them
them.
to climb. Yeah, spoilers for Mulan, by the way. She climbs up the pole. So anytime that I think about those shards and how they are different and how the impact is and how the power is and how it can be such a negative thing, I always think of that scene and I wonder how that's going to progress because we see that with preservation and ruin becoming
Mhm.
harmony. And now I wonder how harmony and discord are going to interact. And then you've got now Odium slash, well, now Retribution. And is there positivity that can come out of that? Because I know
Yeah.
that we're really afraid. Don't get me wrong. There's like a whole lot of not good feeling deep down in my Cosmere gut, but I do wonder if there is some sort of positivity that can also come through it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because as you're talking about the balance that needs to be had when dealing with a power, and that like the power is not necessarily good or bad, it has to do with the way you deal with it and like how you balance it. My question is like, is it possible? Is it even possible for the shards to be balanced in that way? Or is this a result of Adonalsium being shattered that like literally none of them can be balanced? You split them apart.
Yeah, and there's like that concept. I can't remember in Mulan what the general says, but he's like strength and discipline.
I think that's right.
You
Yeah.
need both to get to the top, and it's like all of the shards only have one weight. Like I'm not 100% certain if they have both of the things required to actually progress. And I think that could be what we see, which is maybe Ashley, what you're getting at is like maybe there is a positivity because someone
Yeah.
like a
That if they're
Harmony,
not totally in isolation, like
yeah,
maybe there is some benefit of having two shards together, even if we can't necessarily see it right now. Like maybe that means they're at least slightly more balanced or like have a little bit more perspective.
at the end of this interlude, the logical side of Taravangian concludes that he needs to lead the Cosmere-wide war, and he wants a command staff to help him do that. L is his first selection, and we've already talked about L's interlude. His second selection, very worrying, is the Herald Batar. He goes to Batar and asks her to use the art of crystal spikes. Eventually, we're going to see that come in the form of Moash, very similar to hemalurgy, if not identical to hemalurgy. And we're eventually going to talk more about the interlude with Moash, so I don't want to tangent us too much, but I will just ask both of you, do you think that the Herald Batar, who's been reinserted into the Oath Pact, is actually like still working with Odium?
I have so many questions and qualms about Batar that I need to talk to other Cosmere fans about because she does this whole thing. She's like on Odium's side. He bribes her with like, I'm gonna give you a planet, baby. And she's like, great, that sounds good. I'm in. Let me create this like crystal inquisitor for you. And then she just shows up at the end, like in the Oath Pact again and is like, hey guys, I'm on the good side. Like, what? What?
What do you think, Gary?
Well, did we even hear how she's so like mentally aware? Is that something that was ever addressed?
No, I don't think so. But
So like
yeah.
either she's crazy like all the other heralds, or she's got a good handle on everything and is able to like play both sides and act very, very well. I definitely feel like she's doing double agent right now with the rest of the heralds. I think she read very sincere to me when she threw her lot in with Odium. It seems like she's just very self-interested and wants whatever will get her to whatever her goals are. And so whatever she cares about is where she's going to go. And it seems like Odium has a pretty good handle on what it is that she wants with a new planet.
I want to move us along because we have a interlude that is like one of the more devastating that comes next. This is the destruction of Carbranth. Ashley, you mentioned earlier, like cultivation seems like she's a sneaky woman working in the background. She was a sneaky woman working in the background. She has agents all across the planet, and she activates those agents to go after Taravangian's family. And she's like, you could have chosen differently. Now look how cool I am. I'm cultivation. And Taravangian / Odium becoming more Odium with every one of these interludes that passes. So we eventually are going to see the destruction of Carbranth. And this is kind of in a way, but eventually we get to the end of Wind and Truth. We know it's not like actually committing this much, but it's in a way Taravangian removing himself from the power of Odium. And it's like a step towards fully embracing. He's like, this is what Odium needs to do. This is what I, the god, need to do.
Oh, yeah, he is like trying to get rid of his weakness,
Exactly.
basically.
Yeah, his connections back to the world. This is like
Yeah.
Spider-Man is always in love with Mary Jane, but that puts Mary Jane in danger, so he can't actually be in love, depending on the version. But the basic idea is like separate myself from anything that could be a weakness, and he of course still has that weakness hidden in the spiritual realm pocket
which,
dimension.
in retrospect, we kind of should have clocked, I think, because also he cites his family and his city as being one of the biggest reasons he decides, again, that he does need to do this Cosmere-wide war. He looks at his family and his city and he is like, they'll never be safe. They'll never truly be safe unless I control everything.
Yeah, he ends up saying, quote, emotion insisted on war. In this, remarkably, both intellect and feeling agreed. Cultivation was wrong. War, leading to his control of everything, was the only way. End quote.
And that's when you lose me. That's when it's like, okay,
This
you're
is-
just fully a bad guy now.
Yeah, this is bad guy moment. And I feel like the different natures of himself, everything that we've previously talked about this episode, all of it seems to sync up. And Odium really comes to the fore as all of the different sides and the power are falling into alignment. I want to get, Ashley, your thoughts. Do you think that Odium is a true villain, the true bad guy, or do you think there is still room for some type of redemption arc, even if it takes a very long time?
I want to say, just because I understand that there is a lot of complexity and a lot of nuance to Sanderson's writing, I want to say that there is the potential. There's always the potential for redemption. There's always the potential that something new will come along and make it better, make it right, course correct, whatever. It is hard for me to see that or envision that happening with Odium slash Retribution in the current form. There has been so much that he has driven and his motivations and how he plays them out that just from a like character standpoint, from who he is deep down ingrained, it's hard to imagine that he's going to do something that will flip the switch. I also think that there's validity to asking the question of what is a villain versus what is a hero when it comes to shards, because they play kind of by their own rules. They when we think of a hero, of course we think of Kaladin, we think of Adolin, we think of this knight in shining armor who comes to save people who can't fight for themselves, that kind of person. Odium Retribution exists on an entirely different plane. And so, to some, you might make the argument that he was the hero for Carbranth in that, like, cultivation was using them as bait and was, holding them hostage. And so he did the only thing that he thought he could do to save them by essentially destroying them, but also keeping them to the side in his own personal little pocket dimension, like you mentioned. Like he did what was right to him for the people who mattered most. So in his mind, he probably sees himself as the hero.
Yes.
And so to that degree, you might have this idea, or there's kind of a concept built in that he does have positive motivations, but not for the characters we care about. So does that make him a hero to some and a villain to others? And are we willing to see him as a hero for other characters? Kind of the same thing that we see with Kelsier. Like,
right.
He's a hero on Scadrial. He's not doing too great for the people on Roshar.
I would say I totally agreed with that take until Wind and Truth. Like, up until maybe 3/4 of the way through Wind and Truth, I was totally in the camp of like, I may not agree with the decisions that Taravangian comes to, but he at least is trying to do what he thinks is right. But even Taravangian admits to himself in Wind and Truth that he's not actually trying to do the right thing. We hear, quote, in that moment of uncertainty, Taravangian did what even gods struggled to do. He saw the truth within himself, one he would never admit to any other being. Why conquer? Because someday someone would do it, and he wanted to be that one. End quote. And so he has this moment of like being really truly honest with himself. And when he's really honest, it's not actually like to do any good for anyone. It's just because he wants power and he wants to be the one at the top.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point, especially when you talked about like the 3/4 of the way through, because I've heard that for other characters too. Like I was on board with them until X. I believe that they could still do good until X.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if, because there is this consistent theme throughout the Cosmere of there, it's never too late. Like you can always turn back. Everybody has redemption. But I wonder if there is one aspect that we haven't keyed in on yet, and that is to a point. Like, is there in the Cosmere and from a thematic standpoint, is there a point of no return? And did Taravangian cross that line? Did Moash cross that line? Like, are there other characters in the Cosmere who are now no longer redeemable because of some line in the sand?
Yeah, I think in script writing is often nicknamed the kill the dog moment for the villain. Like if someone kills a dog, you know that person's a villain. There's never been any hero who goes around killing dogs or killing cats and then you're like, I actually really like them. They're always the bad guy. And so what is that line in the sand? I do think it's flexible and it like changes. I might have it for myself and that could be different from another reader. Ashley, what you're saying, like planet to planet, there could be huge differences in like where they draw that line. Because obviously when you're talking about a shard scale, death, the killing of not just a dog, but thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people is all quote unquote normal for a god to deal with. Like Harmony watches death happen all the time. And like most of the time he doesn't send his sword and shield to go prevent it. He just sees that as part of the equation that exist to maintain the harmony. But you also mentioned action and a reaction. And I'm wondering if all of the actions that we're talking about here with the first, the alignment of Odium, but then the birth of Retribution, if that's also going to trigger some reactions and like the transition from harmony to discord, does that happen because of the birth of Retribution? So many more fun theories. I want to keep us moving because we arrive to this very important interlude. It's like the moment where everything truly does snap into place. And Odium is having this final debate within himself, cultivation for a moment, but he comes to the realization that Dalinar and Yasna are two people that he respects and they disagree with him. And cultivation points this out and like, maybe you should listen to the people who disagree that you also respect. And so his goal for the last third of the book or so becomes destroying Dalinar and Yasna. And we see how that plays out in the text. But it is this kind of admittance about who he is, what he wants, the acknowledgement of what the power wants, and how all of them seem to fall together in this pursuit of conquest, where we hear, quote, the two at that moment became one. Questions died there on that mountaintop. Taravangian, Odium, was truly born, end quote. And so this is the actual transition point. We started with, no, I'm Taravangian. Don't let godhood consume me. And now we've reached this moment of Odium is truly born.
Yeah, which I think we also maybe can say that this did not happen for Rhaesa when he was holding the power.
I don't think it did.
There's this real alignment of the vessel and the power that I don't know if we've seen in another shard. And that is maybe what makes it the most dangerous.
Yeah. So, Gary, my question to you is with this birth of Odium, before we get to the different birth of Retribution, but in like this moment, whenever it happens, I think it's like, 60% of the way through the book. Do you see this character as having major advantages over other shards like Ruin and Autonomy, who have both been shown to be kind of villainous? Is Odium worse, or is it just a different flavor on a villain?
Well, first, I don't think any of the shards, and I know you guys have already mentioned this, but I don't think any of them are inherently good or evil. I think, and I already mentioned that I think long term there might be something in Sanderson's philosophy of needing to have all these aspects together and it being better when it's together. But I think he's definitely more dangerous than the other two. Um, More evil, I think it's hard to say. I think they have the same goal, at least with autonomy. Ruin just wants to destroy, right? So that's very pure base instinct. But autonomy is looking to expand, take over everything, and have influence everywhere, which is what Odium's goal is, right? They have the same goal. So from that perspective, it would come out to like how they go about it, and is one way they go about it more evil than the other. One sets up colonies and makes everyone worship them on their planet, and the other one he's looking to do it through war. So you could say Odium's maybe a little bit more evil there. But as far as from a power standpoint, having two shards is more powerful in a sense of brute strength, but also he's going to be limited because where autonomy has more flexibility in their decisions and what they want to do, he has to be very careful because he needs to keep honor happy, and he's going to need to be honorable and keep his promises and not be able to be maybe as conniving or sneaky as he would have been without that shard. So he's limited in that sense as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Do you want to take us into the next couple of interludes as Odium now is kind of like fully in their power?
Yeah, Odium comes into his power. Cultivation sort of sees that he is beyond help at this point. And then we get to this moment that you were speaking about earlier, Tyler, where Cultivation actually takes action against Odium in a much more aggressive way to sort of try to get him to listen to her or do what she wants him to do. And Odium has a really interesting observation about Cultivation. So Odium fully comes into his power. Cultivation kind of sees this. She's like, all right, well, you are obviously beyond reasoning with. And so she actually takes action a lot more aggressively against him to try to get him to either listen to her or just do what she wants him to do. And Odium has this super interesting observation about Cultivation in this moment. He says that she knows the true way of kings, meaning that she knows when to make hard decisions like killing or threatening innocent people in the interest of her larger goals. And he tries to sort of appeal to her cultivation-ness by saying, quote, "And what growth can come from peace?" he asked, quivering with the weight of so many emotions. "Admit it, Cultivation. You let the war proceed for millennia and did not intercede because conflict doesn't just inflame emotion, it forces growth. Your power is intent." End quote. And he notices that while the vessel, core, hates conflict and hates suffering, the power of cultivation actually likes war because, as he just said, the conflict is accelerating learning and achievement or advancement. So in some ways, like, she also has an incentive to maybe not do everything that she could to stop suffering.
Yes, and she is still bound by these same limitations that are impacting everyone else, impacting Taravangian, impacting Rasa, impacting Tanavast and Zazid on Scadrial. You can't overwhelm the power of the shard. And cultivation specifically might be a little better at playing within the realm of the shard, like not upsetting the shard power. So if the shard power wants war because it leads to cultivation, I don't think that the person core is going to say like, no, we're not going to do that. I think they're going to find the way that kind of like gets closer to what they want as an individual, but also is still moving us to war and preventing a true end to the war. And Brandon, after Wind and Truth, did a spoiler Q&A with Shardcast, and when asked about cultivation, how they kind of, left the planet at the end, he said this, quote, "And so I wouldn't count cultivation out entirely, but I would say that cultivation is part of the problem, not the solution. And that's how you should be looking at cultivation," end quote. She can't be part of the solution because she has these limitations in very real ways about how the power exists, what the power wants, and that she cannot fight against the power which wants the war to continue. Ashley, I'm curious if you see this anywhere else in the Cosmere, where it's a aspect of, the shard powers or just like the magic system in general, where it's maybe pushing people who may believe one thing, but they're actually like pushed into conflict in other ways.
I mean, we kind of see that with Harmony a little bit. Like he even acknowledges at one point during Era 2, he's talking about how little progress there has actually been on Scadrial
Yeah.
comparatively, because of just how limited it's been in terms of conflict. And he talked about like, I think there's some quote about by now you guys should have invented the television or the telephone, and I think Wax like, what are you talking about? What are these words? Which is amusing, but it's also like an interesting aspect of it, like this concept that the only way that we can progress, the only way there's going to be innovation, is if there's hardship, which is it's an interesting, I want to say thesis. It's probably not a good word for this, but it's an interesting concept for to show up in the Cosmere a few times, and even I think in Era 1, Ruin was talking about that. Like you can't have like he's like, well, if it was only up to preservation, everything would stay. And I don't want to necessarily destroy everything. I want there to be decay, and there needs to be growth after that. Like and like when you're looking at this balance that keeps on showing up, I think it's interesting that the person, the vessel, has a point of acknowledging that there is validity to this destructive nature. There's the negative aspect of the shard in order to pursue growth, to pursue change in a positive direction. What's interesting when it comes down to cultivation is that, like, there are these are intentional words. The shards have very intentional natures and aspects, and cultivation is not necessarily to see an end result. It is to cultivate, to bring about a result. And so, and it's interesting to me that this concept is that in order to have growth, there has to be some sort of conflict. Because I would disagree with that. I really do. I'm thinking of cultivation in terms of like a garden, and I'm pretty sure I don't have a green thumb, but I'm pretty sure that most gardeners would agree that you have to have like the optimal type of environment, like good soil, good food, good sunshine. Like they're not usually a huge fan of like bad things like bugs. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, like, to an extent, I get that you want to make the optimum environment, but also you hear the stories about like how there are some trees that will get blown over in a hurricane, but the ones that didn't were the ones that had to like dig down deep and really work hard and suffer more, and then those ones are the ones that actually survive the natural disasters. And sometimes there's something to be said, like in nature, like if you like have an egg that's hatching and you do the work for them, you take the shell apart, then they don't learn and they're not strengthened to survive the rest of their lives. So often if you like take the shells apart, those chicks will die, right? And they need to struggle a little bit in order to grow and be able to survive later things that come in their lives.
I think there's also kind of a comparison with Nightblood, where its directive is to destroy evil, but evil is like a very broad concept to the sword. And I think the shard powers are sort of similar, where cultivation, if you presented cultivation with the idea of like, yes, make everything perfect, it will make things grow, it would also be like, yeah, sounds good. Anything that's gonna like cultivate, I'm down. But when it sees like, oh, but also conflict can make things grow, and also this other thing can make things grow, and like there's a lot of different ways that cultivation can come about. And I think the power, it's all like all the same to the power. It's just like, yep, great, down with it. As long as it's like cultivating, I don't really care how that's happening. Uh and we might see that start to change with the shard powers, especially with honor having this little baby sentience and maybe starting to think about, what does honor mean? Maybe it doesn't just mean this like very rigid, specific idea of honor.
Right. And that's a huge aspect of like Dalinar's final gambit is, can he convince the power of honor to think and behave differently? Gary, you mentioned how Ruin is kind of like this base instinct of wanting destruction, guided by Ati in a way that says like, I don't just want to destroy. Ati doesn't, but I think Ruin does. Like Ruin's just happy to destroy. Ati wants to like decay in the way that you would see in a garden with compost. And so it's like decay, but that leads to other growth. And that's kind of like Ati's take on Ruin and why he is claimed to be one of like the best of the vessels, because he has like a very interesting perspective on something as devastating as destruction. It's maybe where there is potential with Taravangian for some type of redemption arc. But I think in this moment, we see a devastation that only Taravangian can enact on his own people for the purpose of not being manipulated or controlled by cultivation. When we hear this, quote, "I will remember you," he whispered as the wave surged toward the city, now 100 feet tall. It was an action he could not have taken anywhere else, for it was too direct an intervention. But Kharbranth, he as a mortal had been promised Kharbranth. That still held. Then Odium, god of passions, destroyed Kharbranth entirely, the one city he'd bargained all his mortal life to protect. End quote.
No, not the books.
The library is destroyed. We have this destruction that he only could have done because Taravangian the Mortal owned the city of Kharbranth, even in the eyes of the power. And so it made everything work in that original bargain.
I think even more interestingly in this moment, we hear that this action kind of changes something about the power. We hear, quote, "He laughed, tears of pain forming at his eyes, because he'd created this avatar to simulate mortal responses. The tempests within his power, the changes to his rhythms were far, far more terrible signs. But even still, tears were familiar to him." End quote. This emotional reaction that he has to this event somehow causes changes to his rhythms, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, that one's a big question mark. I don't have any guesses about what that means. Gary, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about like this specific mention of changing of his rhythms, because he's already like snapped into alignment. So is he now like having a discordant moment? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah,
It's
Big questions.
Not a clue, but it is an amazing question, and I hope that people in the comments share their theories so I can read them.
Ashley, do you want to start us off with any theories? What do you think about this change of the rhythms?
The hard part is that, especially when it comes to the nature of the rhythms in Roshar and in the literature, there's a question of the metaphorical versus the literal. Like,
Yeah.
because is he actually talking about the rhythm of Odium? Is he talking about the literal rhythm that we really went into in rhythm of, or is he talking about like from an emotional standpoint, like it changed, it had this impact to like his core? And I don't know. It's hard to say if it was like it rocked him so hard that he felt that so much, or did he actually feel like his being changed? Because correct me if I'm wrong, this is also the only time that he actually mentions the rhythms, like when
I think so.
in conjunction with. So it seems like it's really out of place. Which on the one hand means, okay, was it a throwaway or was it very impactful to the point where we recognize that he can make changes to his essence?
Yeah. It is
Um,
interesting because this does seem to be such an impactful moment for him. Like he's crying, he's having this big response, and then in the next interlude, he sort of uses that experience to harden himself against the additional difficult things that he's going to need to do. Coming up first is like breaking Dalinar. And so he's kind of like, okay, I already did sort of the hardest thing that I could do. I went through this horrible experience. Now I am strong enough, in quotes. I don't think that's real strength, but strong enough to continue down this path of doing these terrible things. But then he also like didn't actually destroy Carbron.
yeah,
So I'm so curious, like,
exactly.
what is this reaction that he's having? I don't know. It doesn't seem to make sense.
See, I mean, I have plenty of theories. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, if he didn't actually make the sacrifice that results in such a strong emotion,
Right.
then why is he having strong emotion? Especially if he knew it at the time. It would be one thing if he was able to retroactively later on, like do a takesies backsies, but
Yeah.
he didn't. And so no, you're absolutely right. It's the question of, well, then what is all of that about? Like, how is it because is he faking? Or did he actually, even though it wasn't the real deal of sacrificing it, even the very idea of sacrificing made him feel like he went through that? I don't know.
Yeah.
He did sacrifice the city, and
And
I
the
think he
books.
loved his books. I think he
Mm.
loved his books and his hospitals and whatnot. But yeah, but
But he
Yeah. And
saved
I
the
guess
people,
like,
right?
yeah, he saved
Like
at least his family.
I
his
think
family.
I think this is like the interesting question, Ashley. This is really the first time I've given a lot of thought. Like, if his emotion is real to the sacrifice, maybe that is the indicator that what we think happened, he, in that moment of destruction, instantly pocket universed everyone and they're all protected. That's what we think happened.
yeah.
But if his
Mhm.
emotions are real, maybe what actually happened is he goes through some of the spiritual realm shenanigans, learns a little bit more about the power, and then does a takesies backsies. And it's
Mm.
not
I don't know.
real. Maybe this version of Carbranth in the spiritual realm is a simulacrum. It is only of his creation, and he has the ability to create a whole bunch.
Yeah, that was my other thought. Like maybe there is something to more and that he's saved like some aspect
A
of it,
spiritual
but there
aspect.
is something that has died that is gone that will never come back, that will never be the same again.
Like, I could imagine, we see so much at the end, and I don't want to take us up on tangents of like, what is the Blackthorn and cognitive
Oh
shadows
no,
and
we
all this
can't
stuff.
go there.
But just like, if what he saved was a copy, a spiritual realm copy of everyone in Carbranth, and then he rebuilds the city of Carbranth so he can go visit it, that's very different than saving the actual people and keeping them in a pocket universe. And so I don't know if we have enough information to say for certain. I believe it's presented to us as it's a pocket universe, everybody was saved, this wave was just a distraction, but maybe it is more of a mental health processing, like a exposure therapy, like Taravangian's going to slowly go through over years of just like, I did kill you all. I am really sad about it. But for, right now, I'm just going to pretend that all my
Oh,
friends and family
gosh.
are here. And he will slowly let them all go away to the beyond. Which I think is bad. I think this is like maybe another aspect of why Taravangian is like capital B bad and I'll never forgive him. If he is like preventing souls from moving on to the beyond because he's too emotionally devastated to let them go,
Okay, but
that's
then
bad.
then that also brings up the whole like, what's the difference between a spiritual aspect and a
Yes.
soul conversation, and we can't do that.
We will not do that on this because we've done 5,000 different versions. What I would love for us to do is kind of like move towards the end without getting all the way to the birth of Retribution. We're going to save that for another day. But I want to look at this last sequence with Odium where he is trying to torment Dalinar in the spiritual realm. He is focused and maybe like discovers something about the power of honor, which we've already talked about, how it's like becoming sentient. It's gone too long without a host.
Yeah.
And then how he is planning on taking his final actions before the contest actually begins.
Yeah, because before he even thinks about taking the power of honor, he actually thinks about destroying the power of honor. And he describes the way that his predecessor had come about this in the past, first by imprisoning the two shards of Cell inside the cognitive realm, which ended up maybe not being the best way to go about things. And then he actually attacked a shard in Ambition in the Threnody system, and that ended up damaging Odium and having impacts in the actual physical world, destroying planets, etc., etc. And so Odium's kind of trying to think of a better way to go about this. He thinks maybe he can splinter honor so much that it's spread out enough that it won't really provide any resistance to him. But then that kind of conflicts with his oaths. And so he eventually obviously comes to the conclusion that he will take the power upon himself, knowing that for very good reasons, his predecessor specifically did not want to do that. But there is this moment when he comes to realize that he can relate to the power of honor in a similar way that he was able to relate to the power of Odium before he took it. And then when I read this, I start to doubt my hatred of Taravangian and my feeling of being like, no, he's not redeemable. He's gone. Because he does have this moment of thinking about the singers and thinking about how much he's really come to love them and appreciate them and how much he wants to protect them. And then he's like thinking about all the other downtrodden, oppressed people in the Cosmere, and he's like, oh, I want to help them too. And then, obviously he decides that the way to do that is for, quote, all to recognize what he had done in their name, end quote, which I don't love.
So my question for you, Gary, is do you think that we are witnessing the strength of Odium and eventually of Retribution? Or are we witnessing the seeds of his downfall?
Yeah, like, was Reza right that he didn't want to corrupt himself with other shards in order to be the most powerful? Or has he actually become more powerful by taking a second shard?
Yeah, I think it could go either way, honestly. It just kind of depends on how Brandon is going to write it. Because, because if he is more powerful, and that is a stepping stone to make him start gathering more shards, and you're setting him on a path to where he could truly come to be the most powerful being in all of the Cosmere. But at the same time, there are limitations that come with honor that we talked about earlier, that now he is bound to his word, which is good for everyone wanting to work against him. They if they can get him to make a promise, then they're able to maneuver around that. And I think it'll be interesting if we see what Ashley talked about earlier come to pass, where like if more shards come together, we actually start to see the intent starting to like even out, and we start to see a balance of the scales where none of the powers are able to take too much control, and you get someone who's actually pretty decent, and the vessel can actually control it pretty well.
Ashley, what do you think? Is this the seeds of Odium's downfall that we're witnessing, or is it an example of his strength and why he might be successful in his time as Retribution?
I don't think that it's either or. I think it's a point of evolution for him. I don't necessarily think that it leads to the end or destruction of him. I don't think that it shows that he's going to persist. I think that Odium slash Retribution, I don't think that's the end state for him. I think that Retribution is probably going to combine with another shard somewhere along the way and transform into the next phase. I think that this is just a turning point for him in recognizing his intentions and what drives him and what decisions he makes at this point. Like whatever he decides, whatever shard he takes on next is probably going to be in pursuit of that goal, of that desire to either become more powerful or find the means to make what he wants to have happen. So I think it's more of a driving force, not necessarily a strength, not necessarily a hindrance, but just a shift in his intention.
I like that bold prediction that he will continue to take on more shards.
Yes.
Thank you, because if he actually dies in the next book, I'll be like, oh, never mind.
Stormlight Archive 6 begins with, and the whole Retribution thing didn't matter.
Yeah.
That would be the worst.
It's just solved off screen. You know, the Heralds had a big fight. Tom led them to victory. You didn't need to see it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be how it plays out. But what I certainly know for sure is that Taravangian's evolution into Odium and the eventual change to Retribution has been one of the most interesting experiences of developing a villain that I've ever seen in a book series. There are just so many different moments that you can go back to as early as Way of Kings, and you're just getting perspectives and, you know, shadings on, you think you know this character, and then what are they going to become in the future? I have no idea, only predictions. And I really appreciate everyone's thoughts and contributions today as we look at the development of Odium through the interludes in Wind and Truth. I want to give a moment to both of you. Is there any kind of last thoughts that you had, or any topics that we didn't cover that you think are really important and that you want to say? Gary, throw it to you first.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the opportunity coming on and you guys giving us the opportunity to discuss these more in depth. I read the book so fast. I read at 2-point speed. I am due for a reread, but it was really cool to really sit with the things that happened in these interludes and digest them in a way that I definitely did not when I read the book. So I'm just grateful to you two for giving me that experience.
It's all fun experiences for the one. We're big fans of sitting and chilling with our thoughts and saying things, you know, over and over until they become interesting new ideas. Ashley, any final thoughts or big topics that you thought we didn't cover?
I don't know if this is actually a big topic or if I did not grapple with it enough when I was reading it, but I am still very confused as to why Odium has an issue seeing the motivations and decisions that Renarin has. Because that is still a gap and it plays through in Wind and Truth as well. And I think they touched on it because he bonded a corrupted friend.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason why, but I can't remember. But I think it's interesting in that, like, when we talk about the power of Odium, and little cracks in his armor, I feel like there's still something there that I don't know if I just need to do another read through to fully grasp, like, this has already been addressed or not. But it feels like there's just something there for the future, especially since Renarin has been talked about as a big character in the
Yeah.
back half. And I wonder if that's going to play a big part in the downfall slash, like, the fight against Retribution.
Yeah, because I think it's like an ATM kind of thing where you can counteract someone who has ATM by also burning ATM. And
Mhm.
the, like, as a god, Odium has some kind of future sight. But because Renarin can also see into the future, that like changes what his decisions might be, which then complicates Odium's ability to see the future. And so I think that's where the like blind spot comes in. But it's very
Mhm.
important for us to remember that we have people like Renarin, people like Lift, who are probably going to be these really important players because of the way that they kind of break the existing systems.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments and feedback if you have deeper thoughts on how Renarin will impact Retribution going forward. I want to make sure that we give shout outs to your socials. I know the main ones that you both have at CosmereJunkie for Gary, as well as at Stormlight Memes. But are there any others that you would like to promote?
I'd like to promote Ash's threads. She's very funny on there as well and makes lots of funny posts. So make sure you follow her on threads as well.
Thank you. It's interesting you say that because of I have been taking a big step back from like generating content on Instagram and TikTok, but I have been very active on Threads for
Yeah.
reasons I still don't fully know about myself. And if you're not on Threads, it's essentially like the knockoff version of Twitter.
Yeah, it's Instagram, Twitter.
So yeah, exactly. So thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. I do have another kind of a baby account that's growing a little bit. We talked towards the very beginning about balance and finding other things to become passionate about. I have an account on Instagram and on TikTok called Hyperfixation HQ, and right now I'm very focused on K-pop Demon Hunters.
As you
Who
should be.
That's what,
isn't?
Yeah.
Who isn't?
right.
It's the
But-
movie of the summer, but now it's the fall, and we still love K-pop Demon Hunters.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
My daughter
I
makes me
actually
sing her golden to bed every night.
Yes.
that incredible. I found out about it like 2 days after it was released. My kids had no idea it existed before I just dove face first into it, and I dragged them along for the ride. I insist on watching it and playing it in the car.
Perfect. I love that. So that's Hyperfixation HQ, and
Yeah.
primarily on Threads, or is that a TikTok and Instagram?
It's TikTok, Instagram. It's also, I did secure it on YouTube just in case. There's
Okay.
nothing on there yet.
Got you. So follow those social media sites. You can always follow us at Cosmere Convo, as well as over on Patreon. Thank you both so much for joining us today and entertaining us with all of the fun Odium theories. When we exit the podcast, we like to say the first ideal. Brooke, can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death.
Strength before weakness.
Journey before destination.